In the winter of 1941, a mother in Leningrad faced an impossible choice. Her young son had died from starvation. His body was lying cold in the freezing apartment she shared with her surviving daughter. To keep that daughter alive, she began to cut small pieces from his corpse and add them to their thin, watery soup. This wasn't some isolated act of madness. This was the calculated result of a military strategy. This is the story of how Leningrad, a gleaming modern city, was systematically forced to eat itself. Before we continue, this channel covers what history did to human bodies and systems, not myths. Comment where you're watching from. If this is worth your time, like and subscribe. Before the war, Leningrad was a jewel of the Soviet Union, a cultural capital where around 3 million people in the city proper and hundreds of thousands more in the suburbs lived and worked. Trams hummed along grand boulevards. Opera houses glowed at night. It was a city of science, art, and industry. Peter the Great's capital, reborn as a Soviet powerhouse. Its citizens felt secure. That world ended on September 8, 1941. German Army Group North slammed the door shut, capturing the town of Shlisselburg and cutting the last railway line into the city. The siege had begun. That same day, German bombers appeared in the sky. Their goal wasn't just to terrorize, but to destroy the city's food supply at its source. Their target, the Badayev warehouses, the central food depot for all of Leningrad. Incendiary bombs rained down. The city watched as its sustenance turned to ash. Over 3,000 tons of flour went up in flames. Worse, 2,500 tons of sugar melted into a thick black river that flowed through the streets. For days, a sickly sweet caramelized stench choked the air, the smell of burning sugar that promised only starvation. With the warehouses gone and the land route cut, the millions of people trapped inside were prisoners. The German plan was simple and monstrous. Don't take the city with soldiers. Let hunger and winter do the work. It was a racially motivated starvation policy designed to erase an entire population. The descent started immediately. Ration cards were slashed again and again. By October, a manual laborer's ration was down to 400 grams of bread a day. Then came November 20th, a date burned into the memory of every survivor. The daily bread ration for workers was cut to just 250 grams. For everyone else, office workers, the elderly, children, it was a mere 100 to 25 grams. This was a sliver of dense, sticky bread, about the weight of a deck of cards. It was supposed to fuel a human body through a day of hard labor in freezing temperatures. In reality, it was less than 500 calories. A slow-motion death sentence, and the bread itself was a fraud. To stretch the supply, it was cut with anything that could add bulk. Up to 60% of its content was made of things like sawdust, cottonseed cake, and cellulose scraped from wallpaper. Survivors said it tasted bitter and gritty. It filled the stomach, but it starved the body. The city began to shut down. With no fuel, public transport stopped. The pipes froze, cutting off water and sanitation. Electricity was on for just an hour or two a day, plunging the city into a primitive darkness each night. People huddled in their apartments, burning their furniture, their books, their floorboards. Anything for a flicker of warmth against a cold that dropped to 30 degrees below zero. The winter of 1941 to 1942 was when the city broke. It was the coldest winter on record, and it brought a new kind of horror. Hunger was everywhere. First, the pets disappeared. Cats, dogs, even rats were hunted and eaten. Then people turned to the unimaginable. They boiled leather belts and briefcases until they became a gelatinous edible paste. They scraped the glue from behind wallpaper, knowing it was made from potato starch, and boiled it into a thin soup. Death became normal. At the peak, in January and February of 1942, the death toll hit 100,000 people per month. That's over 3,000 people dying every single day. They died quietly in their apartments, at their workbenches, or just collapsed in the street. Their bodies freezing solid in minutes. The city fell silent. No birds, no dogs barking, just the wind and the soft thud of corpse sleds. Small sleds that survivors used to drag their dead to collection points. And then the final taboo was broken. Cannibalism. It was a reality whispered about in terrified tones. The police created special divisions just to hunt cannibals, arresting over 2,000 people. NKVD records show two types, those who ate the dead and those who killed to eat. The typical person arrested for this wasn't a criminal. It was a desperate mother with no prior record, trying to feed her children. Parents became afraid to let their children out of sight. The city wasn't just eating its wallpaper and its pets anymore. It was eating its own people. Just as all hope seemed lost, a lifeline appeared. It came from the one direction the Germans couldn't completely block: the vast frozen surface of Lake Ladoga. The ice road became operational around November 20th, 1941. Soviet engineers, working in brutal conditions, established a 30-mile truck route across the frozen lake. The city's desperate citizens called it the Road of Life. It was a dangerous lifeline. The route was under constant bombardment from German artillery and aircraft. Trucks would break through the ice and vanish into the freezing water. Drivers steered with their doors open, ready to jump out at any second. A trip to deliver food could easily be a one-way journey. But it worked. Starting on November 22nd, convoys of trucks began to arrive, carrying precious bags of flour. It was a trickle at first, but it was enough. That winter, the Road of Life allowed for the evacuation of over 1 million people, mostly women and children. It brought in just enough food to prevent the city's complete collapse. On Christmas Day, 1941, the bread ration was increased for the first time in months. By February 1942, it had doubled. For the skeletal survivors, it was a miracle. It didn't stop the dying completely, but it slowed it down. It was a defiant artery, pumping just enough life into a city that had been sentenced to die. The Red Army finally broke the siege for good on January 27, 1944. It had lasted 872 days. By then, Leningrad was a ghost town. At least 800,000 civilians had starved or frozen to death. Some estimates place the total loss of life at over 1 million. The scars of those 872 days would last a lifetime. Decades later, studies of survivors showed they suffered from higher rates of stroke and heart disease, a permanent mark left on their bodies by the starvation they endured. The survival of Leningrad wasn't a story of heroic charges or brilliant government planning. The authorities failed their people in many ways, from botched evacuations to the hoarding of supplies by the elite. The city survived because of a desperate logistical fix across a frozen lake, and because of the grim, stubborn endurance of individuals. It was in the scientists who figured out how to make sawdust bread rise. It was in the drivers who faced bombs and cracking ice. And it was in the impossible choices made by millions in frozen apartments who shared their last 125-gram crust of bread and simply refused to die. If you found this story compelling, subscribe and press the like button. Let us know in the comments what other historical events you'd like to see covered. Thanks for watching.